Hello, my fellow introverts. Stacy here, your programming and test automation expert. Today we're in Lisbon. This is Walking and Talking Part 4, and we're talking about estimations. So stay tuned and enjoy the views. Planning trips is always about estimates. You need to know when and where you arrive and estimate the duration of travel, evaluate your budget, and estimate the accommodation costs. Even with a good plan, a trip might surprise you. This trip to Lisbon played with my nerves a couple of times, to be honest, but with proper adjustments, you can still enjoy and get the maximum out of it. Similarly to traveling, in engineering we have to estimate how long the implementation will take, how much deployment will cost, or when we can release. Or do we? Well, let's try to answer this question. Let's try to dive into the concept of estimations, time management, and see which decisions you need to make to estimate the easiest and the most convenient way possible. I tried to gather some thoughts based on experience of myself and others and make some conclusions and examples to help you guys with this complicated topic. You may disagree with some of the ideas, and I'm very curious of your thoughts, so let's make it an open discussion if you have anything to say. And just to be clear, this is only the beginning of the topic. There will be more videos about this. It would have been rather impossible to cover everything in one, so if you have any suggestions, paste a comment below and we will consider these ideas in the next episodes. So I believe this is a good intro, so let's get on with it. First of all, let's discuss why do you need to estimate at all? Maybe you could have done it without any estimations. Just get on with it, just write some product and finish it at some point. At some indefinite point, of course. So first of all, the main reason is that you have to deliver it to somebody, right? So you have a customer which would buy it, or you would have some kind of a commitment with somebody. If you are a group of developers who just work on a startup, then you would love to sell this product. Anyway, you need to know when you will do this, because you will have some commitment to other people. If you work for a company, for instance, this company is going to pay you money. And this money is going to go to support the hosting. This money is going to go to collect people who will join your team and start working on this project. So you have to actually evaluate all of this stuff, and time is money, so the longer you work with the team, the more money you're going to spend on this. So this is why this is quite important to give your product an estimate. And second reason is, well, maybe not that obvious, but you have to get a sense of fulfillment for the stuff that you do. So basically, if you work on something for years and years and years and you don't have any estimations whatsoever you're doing, then probably you're going to be sick of working on it because you don't get any sense of fulfillment, which is very important. You have to at least have some iterations where you deliver something and be able to actually say, okay, I finished this is great, we're a great team, and this is something that we have created. So this is quite important as well, and the more of such stages you have, the easier it's going to be to work on the product. So iterative approach is crucial here. The third reason why you need to estimate is actually because you might have a commitment to other teams that work on a big product with you. Well, it not necessarily have to be a big product, but anyway, it's a very common situation that you have some kind of dependency, like an external dependency or internal company dependency, where you have to actually sync with other team, like hardware team, for example, to deliver your part of the product, and they will deliver theirs. So you have to remember about this, because Well, we don't work alone usually. Sometimes on a small project maybe we will work alone, but if it's a big production, then probably you will work with somebody. And this reminds me about the old times when the game development was actually highly dependent on the estimation when they're going to deliver something, because now you can just get it from the internet, from Steam or somewhere, but back then you had to create CDs to actually sell the game. So you had a commitment with a company that produced those CDs, and you have a commitment for a specific date, right? So if you don't do this on this date, well, you're screwed, because basically your game is not ready, but the company you signed the contract with to burn those CDs, they already are expecting for the game. Naturally, there are cases when estimations are irrelevant. This can be true for support, ops, escalation, or bug fixing teams. If you never worked in one, imagine every day you are being bombarded with new, challenging, completely unexpected issues where you have completely zero idea what is happening. You'd rather need to focus on prioritizing work here than giving an estimate to when you fix them. And more to that, there are teams that just investigate and then they pass the rest of the work, the actual fixing, to the team which is responsible for this piece of application. Compared to production or business-oriented teams, support teams work a little bit differently. They rarely use Scrum, they rarely estimate, they often use Kanban, and they react on everything in a very agile way. So here you first of all evaluate the priority of the issues in your backlog, and you pick the most burning ones, the ones that you have to fix just right now. When you will have time, you can address the other ones, but usually you need to prioritize and you do it once a day or even more than once a day. So once you know the root cause, you may estimate how long it will take to fix the incident. Whether to give an estimate here highly depends on the team workflow as well as on the actual effort to fix it. For example, if we want to fix configuration on an unsuccessful deployment, it might take us within an hour to fix it, maybe a couple of hours. So it's easier just to guess and notify relevant people and just tell them, okay, we will fix it in about a couple of hours and you will continue your work. So, as you might have guessed, plannings are irrelevant in such cases for such teams. This is why there is absolutely no point in engaging such teams into safe plannings, quarter plannings, and other ways of, the plannings for the future. And yes, unfortunately, such cases do happen just because companies decide to apply the same rules to all of the teams within a product unit, a department. Ask me how I know. Now, let's imagine that you decided that, yes, I'm estimating, that's good stuff. So how do I pick the measure of estimation? There might be very different ways of estimating, so there is a lot of creativity here that you can apply. And basically, you have to understand why you're estimating. You want to see what is the most crucial thing here. So whether you want to reach the fulfillment or you want to be able to deliver something or what. So once you know that, it's going to be easier to pick a form of estimation. T-shirt sizes, bananas, or even day or night. You can pick anything for your estimation. It doesn't matter, but it's better not to think about time when you're estimating stuff, because this way you will make an illusion that you have control over the days or minutes or hours that you're going to spend on something. This is not going to be accurate because well, shit happens, you know. So basically, it's better to think about some other measure which is better to be treated as complexity. About that, let's discuss it a bit further, how you can be efficient with your estimates and how to approach estimations in new teams. Right, guys, believe it or not, but this and this is all that you need to start estimating. Let's imagine we have a to-do application to implement a classic example, and we want basically to implement the basic functionality. I guess the first functionality that we want to have is just being able to store a to-do item. So let's go ahead. I have like different sizes here, as you can see, right? So we have different ones like this. So we have different sizes here, and I believe that estimating the addition of an item, it's not the easiest thing, but it should be something average, right? So we will take this one. This is going to represent creating an item on our to-do list. Then I can imagine that we would like to be able to get the items, and I think this is very easy get request. We don't need to implement a lot of stuff here. We don't need any pagination at this point. So I think we can estimate it with this small guy here. So now we have the creation, we have the getting of all of the items on the to-do list. Now let's imagine that our application will receive a new functionality to be able to edit the added to-do item. So we might consider here that we will need some validation, we will need to modify the title, we will need to verify whether such title already exists, and blah blah blah. So far it looks like this is a thing that is the largest of them all. So let's go ahead and estimate it with this one. Then we might want to implement a delete functionality. And now we're trying to understand whether it's bigger than this, probably yes. Is it smaller than this? Probably yes, because it's just removing an item by ID or something like that. But maybe we will need some validation again, so maybe it's not that easy, not that straightforward. So maybe we will need a new kind of estimate to be able to add here. So let's put it like this, somewhere in the middle. And last but not least, let's say we need to add some new validation to already existing functionality, which is to create. Let's say we want to validate the title and not allow some numbers or some special digits there. Then it's not going to be something very easy like this, but it's not going to be as complicated as adding a new functionality. So I think we would need another estimate somewhere in between. And there you go. We have a lot of different estimations. So we have the largest, we have the smallest, and if you want to use story points, which it's not a rule to use the story points. If we want to use the story points, so this is going to be 1, this is 2, this is 3, 5, and 8, right? And if something is larger than this, then you will have to go and find another stone, or you will have to split it to smaller ones. So like this, you can actually create a backlog. You don't need time. Just remember that I never told you anything about time. I was just speaking about the complexity of the issues. So just remember that time is not something that you have to think of. You have to think about complexity and compare the issues. This is the best way to do that. Of course, you also have to remember whether the team worked in Scrum or how exactly did they estimate previously and whether they did this at all. So whether they estimated something at all. If they did, it's going to be easier. Maybe just pick the way of estimation that suits them the best, and you will be good to go with this. But if they're new to this, you will have to explain some concepts for them. My high advice here is not to estimate in time, but to estimate in some abstract values. Of course, Scrum and Agile doesn't say that you have to necessarily estimate in story points, but maybe something similar to story points would be a good idea here. When you are estimating in time, you're giving yourself an illusion that you have control over what you are delivering. So maybe sometimes you will estimate in hours or days, and you will feel that, okay, I'm going to deliver this, let's say, in a week. Then, of course, something goes wrong. I'm not even telling about somebody getting sick, but just, some things that, production, for example, was broken and you had to fix it. Well, some bug occurred and you had to look into this, like right now. So these things often happen. So you will spend hours or even a day on fixing them, and the estimate suddenly becomes inaccurate. If you have different people with different backgrounds or with different experience in your team, well, it's going to take one day, let's say, for a junior to make it, and half a day for a middle or a senior engineer to make the same thing. People might be engaged into some stuff, they might go for vacations, so it's not always that accurate. And of course, remembering about dependencies, so this highly affects the time of working on something. So it's much easier to be able to estimate not in hours or days, but to use some abstract. Even I would not say that this should be time, but more think about complexity, not time. This is a mistake that a lot of developers make when they think of story points or something abstract like that. They are thinking about time, that one story point is one day or something like that. This is not true. Actually, story points are about complexity. So if you want to measure something in story points or some abstract value, never think about time. Of course, complexity leads to time at some point, but this time is going to be different for different teams, for different people, but the complexity will stay the same. So if you work with more abstract values and you focus on the complexity, not time, then after some point, in average, you will see that, okay, for this particular team, this particular task of this complexity will take in average this amount of time. In average, I have to highlight this. And another thing will take, let's say, less or more. And after you try to do this for a couple of times, for a couple of sprints, you will understand how much time each of them takes. And this is going to be different for all of the teams, which is actually called velocity. If you don't know what velocity and capacity is, here is a quick explanation. Agile teams work in iterations. Ideally, they plan their work, and then, after completing the work in an iteration, they summarize how much work they successfully completed. The amount of completed work is an abstract value, so this could be story points, stones, bananas, and even days, meh. This amount of completed work will show your velocity. After several iterations, you can get the average velocity value. So, for instance, your team works in sprints using story points. The team took 10 issues of 30 story points into the first iteration and completed 29. So, the velocity for this first sprint would be 29 story points. Then, in the next sprint, they planned 9 issues for 30 story points, and in the second one, they finished all of them. Just, ideally, 30 story points. And after that, they planned another sprint for 15 issues of 25 story points, and they finished even more than they planned. They finished 26 story points. So now, if we want to get the average velocity, we would need to sum up all of the velocities that we have and divide them by 3. So basically, you take 29 plus 30 plus 26 and you divide this number by 3 and you get 28 story points. And this is going to be your average velocity. This value can help you to understand how many story points, stones, or bananas you can take into the next iteration. So you will know that you can safely plan to complete 28 story points within the next iteration. But here comes a challenge. People get sick, they go on vacations, you get public holidays, or they're just company events which affect how much you can plan for the sprint. These external factors are taken into account when planning by calculating team capacity. Once you know your average velocity, to calculate the capacity, you have to see how many days of the sprint people will be absent, or how many days within the sprint there are some activities or something not related to the work within the sprint, and you have to consider this in your estimate. So, for instance, if one person from 2-person team is going for vacation for one sprint and you know that the velocity is 28 story points, then your velocity drops to 14 story points for this particular sprint, because this person is not going to be available for the whole sprint. So you can just divide it by 2 and, just take less story points. This is not very accurate because we're not taking into account the actual experience and how fast this person works. But remember that when we estimate something, we also do it for the team. So these are very average values. And this is the goal, because the velocity is also not very accurate. It's always a very average value. So this is why you rather will not have any troubles with going with this direction. So just remember that you have the velocity, you have the capacity, and these values can really help you in planning your work better. So, my fellow introverts, it's time to end this part of this series about the estimation, because we just covered the engineering part of this topic, and the topic is very big. Next time we'll try to focus ourselves on discussing how estimations work for management and how maybe to make it better to work with management. Well, anyway, I don't want to spoil anything. We will see next time what would be the exact topics covered. And this is going to happen not in Lisbon. I hope you liked Lisbon and you liked the views and you liked the overall stuff that we discussed in this video. So don't forget to check the links in the description. I tried to find some interesting threads and discussions about estimations. So just check them. Maybe you will find some valuable information. I hope you now know how to estimate in new teams and you will not struggle with that too much. I'm really interested, what do you guys think about this topic and how you approach estimations? So please leave down there some comments about that. And well, I wish you a happy coding, a happy estimations and happy planning. And I will see you very soon in the new episode of this series.